She spat in my face, let a man attack me, and tried to erase me from my nephews' lives. But now she's in prison, and I'm raising her kids as my own. My sister left her kids at my house and told me I had to babysit them while she went on an 8-week vacation when I said I would call the police. She had someone come to my house and attack me, just so she could take them back. Golden children never turn out like their parents imagine, and my sister was living proof ever since we were kids. She got whatever she wanted, no matter how mean or unfair she was. My parents, especially my mom, let her get away with it because she was the golden miracle child. What made it worse was she was naturally beautiful. She had curly hair and light eyes, while I had dark eyes and straight hair. My mom would always compare us, especially after we became teenagers. She used to tell me to dress more like her, and even asked her to teach me makeup. But instead of helping, she would mock me and make fun of me. Anytime I tried to look nice over time, we grew up resentful of each other. I think she embraced all the worst traits from our mom, while I tried to reject them. My mom put her on a pedestal her whole life, just for being pretty, and that turned her into someone who only cared about herself and thought she could get away with anything because of how she looked. My mom's constant comparisons made me feel like I was never good enough, and that ruined my self-esteem as an adult. I became quiet and reserved, and people often say I'm a pushover. Lately I've been going to therapy, trying to build confidence, but it's hard, especially since I never learned how to stand up for myself in relationships. My family messed me up so badly, I find it hard to make friends or even have a healthy relationship with anyone. My sister even slept with my high school boyfriend during senior year, even though she always said he was ugly and never liked him. My parents just told me to move on and never even scolded her. That was when I truly realized they always preferred her over me. My dad just stood there and watched my mom emotionally tear me apart all my life, and it made me believe no man would ever defend me or think I was worth anything. And now I struggle to trust or feel close to anyone. But not everything in my life was ruined. Thanks to them, being the so-called ugly sister meant I had no social life and ended up studying all the time. I finished high school with a perfect GPA and got a full-ride scholarship to my dream university, which turned out to be a blessing. Because my mom had told me before high school that she was going to pay for my sister's college, but I would have to go to community college and figure it out on my own. I remember crying and asking her why she didn't love me like she loved my sister. She claimed she did, but said my sister deserved more because she was her firstborn when I got the scholarship. I was so excited to finally have something she didn't. My sister spent her school years partying and barely passing. But my parents still planned to pay for her education. She didn't even get into a good college because her grades were so bad. So when I rushed home to tell my parents about my scholarship, I had never been more thrilled. But when I told them, my dad just said good job, and my mom didn't even look up from her phone, she ignored me for the entire week afterward. I tried to ask her why she was upset, but she wouldn't look at me and just left the room. It was like she hated me for doing something right, something she should have been proud of. That was the moment I truly understood how alone I was and how my family wanted me to feel invisible. I never understood why she even had me. Just to treat me like I didn't matter the day I got my scholarship should have been one of the best days of my life. But instead, it became one of the worst. I cried myself to sleep, knowing I would never have the kind of love my sister did, and I hated her for it that night. I wrote in my journal until morning and promised myself I would turn my pain into power. I was done crying and begging for love. I would focus on what I could control: my education, my future, my independence, even if I never got the love I deserved. And that's exactly what I did. I graduated with honors, landed an amazing job right after college, and started making 6 figures by the time I was 23. When I came home for the holidays, I would update my family on how I was doing. And sometimes, extended relatives would say nice things, but my own parents never acknowledged my accomplishments as an adult. I stopped telling my mom anything about my success because it just made her resent me more. But I told my dad once, and he actually said he was happy for me. And that was probably the nicest thing either of them ever said to me. Still, my mom treated me like a burden. Even when I visited, only during the holidays, she would find ways to shift attention away from me, like one Christmas. When my uncle congratulated me on my 2nd promotion and raise, I had been telling him I was house shopping. And when others joined in and asked questions, My mom cut in and said, "This is boring. Can we change the topic?" Then muttered under her breath that it probably wasn't even true. I did end up buying my house later and posted about it on social media. Everyone liked it except her. I knew it was because she was bitter that my sister was struggling. My parents had paid for her college, and she still failed out, then got pregnant by some guy she barely knew. They tried to fix things by having another kid, but it was a disaster. Both of them were toxic, and even when I met her boyfriend during the holidays, he ignored me and brought nothing while taking trays of food. Unsurprisingly, my relationship with my sister never got better. We didn't talk unless forced to, and she always mocked me during the holidays about my weight or my clothes. She hated that I wore designer things and accused me of faking it one Thanksgiving. She looked at me and said, "Wow, dressed up again, like the stuck-up bitch you are." She even cursed at me in front of her own young kids. It was vile, but nothing compared to what she did next. One quiet weekend, my doorbell rang, and I found her kids, 10 and 7, standing there with overnight bags. They said their mom was on vacation for 8 weeks and told them I would watch them. I hadn't even talked to her since July 4th, when she told me to stop eating so much because of my muffin top. I let the kids in and started calling her over and over. She ignored me until she finally answered, and I told her I wasn't watching them, and if she didn't come back, I'd call CPS. She threatened to tell my job I wasn't taking bipolar meds and get me fired. It was a lie, but I panicked. My career meant everything to me, and I couldn't risk it. I was shaking and had a big trip planned to visit my boyfriend Eric in Australia. I had been looking forward to meeting his parents, and now this disaster landed in my lap. I called my mom as a last resort, and she of course defended my sister, saying her kids were old enough to come alone and that I owed her this favor. She tried guilt-tripping me, saying my sister had done so much for me, which pushed me over the edge. I yelled, asking for even one example of her helping me ever, and reminded her that they both treated me like an outsider in my own family. I begged my mom to come watch the kids so I could still make my trip. She eventually came, but acted cold, and lectured me about family and support. I asked what kind of vacation my sister was on that was worth abandoning her kids for 2 months. And finally, my mom admitted, it wasn't a regular trip. My sister was with her sugar daddy. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking, but she was serious. I broke down yelling that she raised a total failure of a daughter, and she had the nerve to say none of my success mattered, and that I'd always be the ugly duckling born ugly and would die ugly. That's when I lost it. I told her to get out, and she pushed me into my coffee table, breaking one of my favorite vases my boyfriend had gifted me. I just collapsed crying and screamed at her to leave, or I'd call the police after she finally left. My nephews peeked out, looking scared, and it crushed me. I let them eat and watch movies that night, just trying to hold it together. Later, I called my sister and told her again I'd call CPS, and she laughed and reminded me that I was nothing without my job, and she would ruin me. I felt powerless and asked her why she hated me so much. She said I'd never understand what it's like to make millions off a man, and laughed again. I was shaking, crying, and totally trapped. I finally called my boyfriend, who was the only person who truly cared. He listened to me vent and told me I needed to record my sister's threats and get evidence, since she could actually try to destroy my career. I was scared, but he was right. I knew what my sister was capable of, and I decided to follow his advice. Even though I was completely overwhelmed by it all, I still wanted my nephews to feel comfortable and cared for. I knew what it felt like to be a child in a home where you weren't wanted, and I didn't want these innocent little boys to ever feel that way. I went downstairs and played a multiplayer video game with them, and surprisingly, it was really fun. They were amazed. I knew how to play first-person shooters and giggled while watching me get kill after kill. I hadn't expected to bond with them after such a stressful weekend, but when we ordered pizza and had a contest to see who could eat the most pepperoni, I realized I honestly loved them. They were nothing like their mom, even though she hadn't been the best parent. Both boys were polite and sweet. Once they opened up, they always said please and thank you, and cleaned up after themselves as we spent more time together. I noticed holes in their socks and clothes that looked too small. I checked the rest of what my sister had packed and saw most of it was old or didn't fit again. Not shocking coming from her, but it pushed me to take them to the mall for new clothes. I nearly cried during that trip. They ran around so excited, so happy, and I just wanted them to feel like they could have anything they wanted. Every time they saw a store and wanted to go in, we went in, and I kept buying them what they liked. It was impossible not to spoil them. My youngest nephew was missing his front teeth, and his goofy little smile melted my heart. I had no kids of my own, and money wasn't an issue, so when I bought them Nintendo Switches, they both broke down in tears and hugged me on the ride home. My older nephew looked at me with tears and asked why I was being so nice and what they had done to deserve it. I told him they were my boys too, and that just being kids meant they deserved happiness. He cried even more and admitted he was angry at his mom for keeping us apart. It shattered me. I told him I was sorry we hadn't met sooner, but I was so glad they were here. Now I asked about their home life, and it was exactly what I feared. Both of them slowly opened up about how badly their mom treated them. Hearing the pain in their voices made everything real when we got home. I cooked dinner and let them play on their Switches while I stepped into my room and called my sister again, this time ready to follow my boyfriend's plan. I kept calm, even though I wanted to scream at her. It wasn't hard to lead the conversation to the medical accusation. As soon as I brought up CPRAs, she flipped out and started threatening me. She kept calling me crazy and claimed no one would know if she lied and said I wasn't taking my meds. She said no one would believe me and that I didn't deserve my job. I honestly think she might have been on something during the call. She was rambling nonsense after getting what I needed. I hung up while she kept repeating that I didn't deserve anything. I made sure the whole thing was recorded and had her admitting she was planning false medical accusations against me. I realized how smart my boyfriend had been to suggest this and started bracing myself for the fallout in case she followed through with her threat. I tried to calm down and tucked my nephews into bed the next morning before they even woke up. I called CPs the moment their lines opened and told them everything, how she abandoned her kids and lied to trick me into taking them in. I told them how she used manipulation and blackmail to force the situation, and then shared the audio recording. The CPS agent listened to it and agreed she was clearly using threats to get out of parenting and possibly committing crimes. They said they'd open an investigation immediately and would be contacting her soon. I was shaking after the call, but tried to relax and spend the day with my nephews. The next day, my mom called, and for some reason, I picked up, maybe because I was emotionally drained. We got into a huge fight, and I slipped and told her I had called CP, and my sister would pay. My mom hung up right after I said that I was still shaking from the stress of calling CPs. And then the fight with my mom. I didn't regret it, but I knew she would protect my sister. No matter what, she didn't care about my nephews, just like my sister didn't. All I really knew was, my mom hated me and adored my sister, and I had no clue what would happen next. But I was sure my mom would call her immediately and warn her about CPs, and by the next morning, my sister would know everything. I barely slept. And when I got to work, my receptionist told me my supervisor had called an urgent meeting with me before lunch. I was nervous, but not surprised. I knew my sister was unpredictable and clearly wanted to destroy my life. I sat down in the meeting, cracked my knuckles, and faced the 3 people staring at me, 2 supervisors and a higher-up. I didn't know, they looked at me like I was under a microscope. They said someone from my family had contacted them and claimed I was possibly off my meds and dealing with a serious mental illness. They even told me that they had been given extreme details about past mental breaks that I have had, and they were concerned about me having a psychotic break within the office. But neither they nor my sister knew how prepared I had been for this meeting today. Of course, I knew that my sister was going to follow through with her threat. She had always hated me, and being able to rob me of my high-paying position would be the ultimate screw you to her ugly little sister, and I knew she wouldn't hesitate to do it. But she would revel in it if I hadn't been watching her nephews, even if I hadn't called CPS. Then I'm sure that she would have held it over my head and just kept blackmailing me into doing whatever she wanted me to do for her. So in a way, I was happy to be dealing with this and getting my sister's crap out of the way. I took out my briefcase and gave all of the supervisors a copy of my doctor's letter, as well as the attached documentation that proved that I had been diligently following my medication regimen. There was proof going back almost 5 years that I had never missed a prescription pickup date and that my medication had been regular as well as my moods. I had verification from not only my primary care physician, but my therapist and my psychiatrist as well. I gave my supervisors an informative but concise explanation into the issues within my family and my sister's own mental health struggles, and informed them that the claims were completely unfounded, and they could be sure of my stability based on all the medical paperwork I was providing for them. My supervisors took a while to look through all the paperwork, but as soon as they saw that I had medical evidence from multiple MDS, they seemed completely satisfied and even apologized to me for the inconvenience of calling me into this meeting, and explained that they just had a responsibility to do their due diligence before they closed this matter. My one supervisor even took the opportunity of the meeting to congratulate me on the successful quarter I had just had, and bragged about my performance to the other supervisors, which made me look excellent. I literally left the meeting giggling because of how well it had went, despite the reason for it, and thought about how poorly my sister's moronic plan had backfired on her. I could barely focus on my work for the rest of the day because I kept smiling dumbly every single time I thought about how I got to call my sister after I finished work and tell her about how her plan had been a complete bust. I called my sister as soon as I got back to my car that day and almost cried laughing as I told her about how the meeting had only taken about 15 minutes because she had sounded so crazy and stupid on the phone, and my bosses had never believed her in the first place. My sister was enraged and accused me of lying and said that she was sure I had been fired, and then I was just trying to save face. This made me laugh harder, and I told her that she had failed at trying to get me fired, just like she had failed at everything else in her life. I told her that the only skill she had as a woman pushing 40 was lying and failing, and that even her own children were disappointed in her. My sister lost it all over again and just kept calling me the B word and the S word over and over again, claiming that I had completely betrayed her and said that she was hopping on the first plane back and that she was going to make me regret every single thing I had done to her. I was still laughing after the call, but by the time I got home and reunited with my nephews, who were in much better mood since they had gotten dropped off at my place, I realized that this whole situation was far from over and might get worse before it got better. All I knew for sure was that my sister was completely out of her mind, and now she was flying home from another country to come get revenge on me. I realized that I was honestly terrified of what was going to happen next. My sister basically had nothing to lose at this point, and she had always been unhinged, and I started to fear for my safety. Then I started to think about my nephews. I wondered if I had made a mistake calling CPS. A huge part of me wished my sister had lost her passport overseas and never came home. I had gotten so much closer to my nephews in the past couple days, and I realized that my heart was going to break when they had to leave. I didn't want to say goodbye to them. I didn't want to watch them walk back into my sister's arms. She was perpetuating the same thing my mom had done to me, and I realized I hated her more than anyone on this earth. I checked on my sleeping nephews as I couldn't sleep since my mind was racing, and I cried quietly in the hallway after closing the door to the guest room. They were such innocent little boys, and they didn't deserve any of this. I stood in front of the judge in a custody battle, thinking how strange it looked me on one side, and my sister a woman with a sugar daddy on the other. I tried to stay calm, but I could not stop worrying about my nephews. I kept thinking about the huge man my sister brought to my house, wondering if he was the same man now with my nephews. I was still lying on my couch, lost in thought, when the police finally called back. They had found the black SUV after searching for hours. The officer said they used 3 cars to stop it, because the man had already been violent that day, and when they tried to stop him, he ran at them, even with guns drawn. He punched 2 officers and gave a female cop a black eye. My sister attacked an officer too. I was stunned picturing my sister and that man fighting cops on the highway. It felt unreal, like a show, not my life. Then the officer told me my sister wanted to use her one call to speak to me. He warned she would probably ask for bail money, and he was right. I told him I would not take her call. She could stay in jail for all I cared later.